Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are glad to have you here today. Moonshine Jesus Show is brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. And today we're talking about the Academy Award winner for Best Picture, CODA.
Aha!
Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I want to remind everybody as they join us here that this will not be a spoiler-free podcast. We
Very
love
important.
the spoilers and we go at them hard. So there will definitely be spoilers. But yeah, I'm doing great. Stayed up late to hear the announcement of what because we made the decision to cover the Best Picture without really probably thinking closely enough about the timing of it, and that we were going to have 12 hours or so to find in our schedules the time to actually watch the show, develop opinions about it, and then talk about it. But I'm doing okay, all things considered.
Especially difficult for you. You're 3 hours ahead of me, so I still have like the whole night ahead of me.
Yeah, it finished at 12:30 ish my time, so I was like, I'm that's well past my age.
It's
that's
past
well
your bedtime, Mark.
Way past my bedtime. I was literally, every time they would go and do something and it wasn't Best Picture, I was like, oh, come on, man. I just want to go to bed.
It's coming, right? When's it going to come? So you watched it this morning.
I watched the movie this morning. I just hours ago finished it. So this is all pretty fresh to me, man. So it'll be interesting to have the discussion for sure. And I'm glad to have a beverage along with it, though. Might help me out.
What are you drinking?
For those who have seen the movie CODA, this will make sense to you. At least the name of it will. My drink is called a Grumpy Old Man. And it's a bourbon, ginger ale, and lime juice. And I like it because just like in the show where the character of Frank comes off originally as a grumpy old man, after you taste it, you realize it's not really all grumpy. There's some fun and happiness and joy in this drink too. But it sums Frank up for me. How about you? What are you having?
Grumpy old man. I love that.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this later, you won't be able to see it, but today I'm wearing my Oscar finest.
He is looking dashing and debonair. I just want to say it. If you're not seeing us live, he's got his Oscar look on for sure.
I do. So since I didn't know what we were going to be talking about today, I didn't pre-plan a themed cocktail. And so I just went with a more general glass of champagne.
It's perfect for the Oscars.
Yes, isn't that great?
And how fitting for the Oscars. This is this is supposed to be our final Oscar show. We said we're going to do the month of March Oscar show, but we'll announce right now that we're going to do one more Oscar show. So we kind of knew that more than likely one or two films was going to win.
Right.
It's going to be CODA or The Power of Dog. It was CODA. We've decided, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later probably, that we're going to do one more show on the Oscars, The Power of Dog, for next week. So be sure, if you're watching and listening this week, to tune in next week. It should be an interesting discussion. So I approve the champagne, man. I think it's It's a classic drink. How do you go wrong with champagne?
You can't go wrong with champagne. It's great. So cheers to you. And cheers to all of you who are out there listening. Let us know what you're drinking as well.
Absolutely.
We'll be back with you when we come back from the drop.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Well, today, Caleb, we are talking about CODA, as we've already said. CODA is a coming of age story. It is a coming of age story about a family of 3 generations of fisher people from Massachusetts. And the CODA stands for child of deaf adult.
Right.
And the show centers around CODA. The one child is a family of 4. There is one child who Ruby, who is a hearing person in a family who her brother and parents are deaf. And this movie was nominated for Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay, and it won all 3 of them.
Yeah, incredible film. Incredible film.
And before we move on to talk a little bit about this, I just want to remind folks, please, if you're watching online right now, live, go ahead and in the comment sections, put some questions in there. We're going to try to cover anything you ask at the end of our show. I've already seen when you asked about drinks, Ellen Green is letting us know that she's enjoying a Ruby, Campari, gin, Ruby Red grapefruit juice, and squeeze of lime. I think I can enjoy that
great.
very much.
Yeah, I love that. I love themed cocktail from those who are listening as well. So let us know if you've got
absolutely. That was kind of perfect. I feel embarrassed that I didn't spot that one. That was on the money.
It's great. It's great.
Is. So Caleb,
yeah, CODA, and it's also symbolic, right? Because a CODA is used in music, and this kid,
it's the beginning of the end.
Right. Yes. And so she is not only the only hearing child in this family of deaf people, but she also loves music, and it is her way of relating to the world.
And a coming of age story, CODA, beginning. This the beginning of the end of her childhood kind of story.
Yeah.
I'm going to push us a little bit later on some other things that might be involved in that. But in general, what did you think of it? It won Best Picture.
Yep, it did.
What did you think of that? Of it winning?
It was a beautiful film. So I hadn't seen it before last night either, and I found myself I'm not like a crier at movies. I was like sobbing. I was like, man, this film is powerful. I posted
that I thought there was way too much crying in the movie. Most of it mine, but still, way too much crying.
But you know what? It was also hilarious in a way that I didn't expect.
It really was. I tell you, this film has me pulling in different directions. For instance, like you said, this great juxtaposition between happy crying, sad crying, of joyful laughter and raucous laughter. Just amazing. But also, and it wins Best Picture, but my problem is it's so formulaic. Oh my gosh, everything in this is just well, there's X problem. Well, we should do Y and it might work out. Oh, we did Y and it worked out. Oh, it's so formulaic that I kind of feel like I shouldn't like it.
I felt that, but I was also I was so rooting for them in the show. I'm like, because the show, it centers around whether or not she's going to go to college or whether she's going to stay and help her family who are, fish for a living. And I thought, she's not going to go. I bought into I'm like, she's got to go to college. She's got to go sing. And are they really going to embrace her?
That's sort of a classic in these kinds of movies.
That
you have this great idea of what you're going to do and how you're going to break out of the small town world that you're in. Then an obstacle comes out and your heart wins over. And so Ruby, says, I won't do it. And then the family's like, oh, you got to do it. I mean, it's just so there's every reason why I should this. It's almost like a Disney movie with a little bit of sexual innuendos, some straight sexual stuff, and some cussing. But if you pull those out, it's oh well, when you watch this, you watch it on Disney, right? Because it's just so sweet and it's perfect. Somehow it still works.
Yeah, well, tell me, why do you think it works, Mark? If it's formulaic?
I'll tell you exactly why I think it works. Why? I think it works because it has so much authentic heart. It is not produced heart. I don't think. I mean, the fact that this one for adapted screenplay, I have questions about because I do think it is a little bit of formulaic writing, but. I actually feel like the director who also wrote this probably should have won for Best Director because it was almost a Herculean task to pull off a formulaic coming of age story and make it have authentic heart. And part of how I think that happened was the mother in this, Jackie Rossi is the character's name, but Marley Martin, who we've known for a while and has won an Oscar already, insisted that the roles of deaf people be played by deaf people.
Yeah.
And it gave such an authentic heart to that family. It was so real when they were together. There was nothing false about it. So I feel like that was probably a big part of why you pulled off this very formulaic film, and it was so sappy at times. Sappy that got me. Like, I'm bawling.
I know. It didn't take itself too seriously either. I think that's one of the things that was kind of powerful, because a lot of these movies like this, that are Oscar bait, they take themselves a little too seriously. And this showed the deaf community, I think, as real people going through real situations. And we've not seen a whole lot of, we have about different communities, but not about the deaf community. And so that was very interesting, because I was thinking about
it. I agree. And I think that points back to how authentic the heart of it felt, the family of it felt. Online right now, Maureen Hamilton's echoing that it worked because the characters are so relatable and believable. And I think that is very much true. And the acting, let's not get away from that.
Yeah.
For years, we've seen deaf roles being given to non-deaf actors and actresses. And part of the argument has always been where they don't have as much experience and they're not, this should shut that argument down forever. These lead characters were astounding.
Yeah,
absolutely
fantastic.
Astounding at the role.
And I was kind of like, whenever I heard that it won, and I knew I was going to have to watch it, I'm like, well, am I going to have to just sit there and am I going to be reading captions? And so that's kind of the way I went into the movie.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I remember during the movie going, this was really mean of them. Like, this is a movie we have to read, and I'm crying all the time. How am I supposed to do this?
But so as soon as it started, I'm like, oh, this is incredible. It's incredible because it's fun. It's the way they talk to each other too. It's colorful and fun, and you can see the love in the family and the way that they're signing to each other, the way that they're talking to each other. And I think that makes
it so real. It's a family we all long for, right? Where we're open, we're honest, we're real. There's no games being played, And I do think that's part of another reason why for directing, this should have been probably have won for directing, in that it handled that in such a beautiful way. It'd be very easy for this to be a boring movie because you basically have to read most of the lines.
Sure.
And it gets very hard to jump back and forth. I love reading and I love movies both.
Yeah.
I hate reading my movies. It's just me. But it's done in such a beautiful way, and you feel like you're learning, because you're learning something about the deaf community as it goes on. There's so many beautiful moments that the director pulls you into that world. For instance, the 3 times that I cried the hardest, 2 of them were completely silent moments.
Yes. Yeah.
The first one, when Ruby is with Mr. V, the music teacher,
right? The music
and
teacher.
He asks her, how does she feel when she sings, and she goes, I don't know how. And then she signs.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
It was like it expressed something that words could not have done. Like, she showed her knotted up stomach, and then she kind of released it, and then she pointed to herself and showed herself standing, and then showed herself floating away. And she basically said, I feel free. I feel free.
Right.
And it was so amazingly deep and soulful and honest, and it was completely silent.
And it gave a better feeling. It gave a better understanding to that feeling than words could describe. Because that's all we're doing, and when we're using words to we're trying to describe something that that we feel within us, but can't really adequately be described in
Exactly.
words anyway. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was a
And it's
beautiful
always
movie.
this interesting
Yeah.
juxtaposition. I think that the whole death and music thing's a little overdone
Yeah.
in theater and in
Yeah.
movies in general, but they still they navigated these things in these beautiful ways. So when
Yeah.
she's performing on stage and her deaf family is there watching, and she starts singing,
Yeah. The most powerful moment in the film. One
and
of
then
them.
they
Yeah.
slowly fade her voice out as the camera
Yeah.
pans back to where the family is sitting, and you're
Right. You have to
watching
experience it.
everything
Yeah.
through their eyes and
Yes.
not hearing everything through their ears, and it goes
Right.
complete silence. And we're watching everyone else react, and we're
That
watching
was
them.
so powerful.
Oh, and we watch them cue each other, like
Yeah.
tapping on the shoulder and
Yeah.
pointing over. Look, there's that
Yes.
woman, and the
She's
tears are
crying.
coming.
Yeah.
Like, it was so powerful, and it felt like it was such a allowance to be brought into their lives and
Yeah.
understanding of what their experience is. And it wasn't a, oh, this is sad and horrible. This was just a real grounding moment of here's that life.
Yeah. That's when I lost it.
Oh, me too.
I lost it in that moment because we had heard her sing,
Oh, yeah.
and so we knew how breathtaking her voice is because, geez, that actress, her voice is breathtaking.
And you know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
She wasn't a singer before this. She took
That's
voice
incredible
lessons.
because
She also couldn't sign before this movie.
I mean,
She took 6 months to learn to sing and sign.
I just sat there through the credits while they were rolling. And I just listened to her voice. I'm like, I wonder if she's got an album. I mean, she's fantastic.
Well,
the voice.
the final credits was a song that was written with the thought that maybe this could be her release song or something like that. So
yeah, because it was about the movie. It was about.
Yeah, before we go to the drop, though,
Yes.
I want to push a little bit here.
Bush.
I think maybe we've talked about what the movie is about and what we should what we should take from it, and that it's a coming of age story. I think this is actually a movie of how important it is to face our fears if we want to move on to the next part of our story. Everybody in this movie is fearful of something. She's fearful of leaving her family and figuring out who she is. Mom's fearful of what the public will think of her, of any kind of negative interaction, so she doesn't have any friends out there. Dad's fearful of losing his business and what any change to business might do to them. Her brother is fearful of not having enough importance in his family and being pushed to the side. And I mean, we could go on and on. And I think the moment that it really hit me that this is about pushing through fear, in the midst of about where the big change happens, where she really makes that switch and is going to be going off to college.
Yeah.
She and her new boyfriend are down at the rock quarry.
Yeah.
On this 40-foot drop off or 70-foot, I don't remember now. And they just leap together in the scary, like into the unknown, almost void. And that's the moment I realized this is a movie about breaking through fear and how it takes us to the next, ends each stage of our story, the coda of our story, and moves us on to the next.
That sounds like it has some maybe theopolitical ramifications, Mark.
I think you might be right. I think you might be right. So why don't we take a quick drop here and come back and talk about that?
Sounds good. Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where we are talking about the movie CODA. If you are just joining us, glad that you are here. So, Mark, right before the drop, you were talking about how this is really a movie about facing fears and overcoming what's holding us back. And it seems that maybe that's something that we have to deal with as a country as well. Can you think of anything going on in our world right now that we're having to face fears about and try to move through? Is there anything like that going on?
Well, I'm not sure that is not exactly what's wrong with all of our politics right now. Whether we're talking about immigration, the war, COVID, go through the list of all of the issues in politics right now, and at least part of what we're having to deal with and why we're seeing some really almost illogical responses is fear, right?
Yeah. I think you're right. Fear is one of the things that holds us back the most. Being afraid, the unknown, right? And certainly it was for the family in the movie. The unknown of what will college be like? What will the Berkeley School of Music be like without family for the main
Right.
character?
She said, I've never known life outside of my
never known
family.
life.
I mean, that was her
Right.
fear. Who am I if I'm not
Right.
the interpreter? As much as she
Right.
rebelled against that,
Yeah.
you know,
It was her identity.
I've
right?
never been a child mom. I've never been a child. I've always been an interpreter. I've always been.
That's right. Oh, you know what?
But at the same time, there was this fear of who am I if I'm not that?
If I'm not right. Even though she embraced that, and her mom asked her at one point why she sang. She said, "Would you be a painter if I was blind?" Yeah.
Oh my
And,
God.
right. Which was, but she said, "Why do you sing?" And she
But
said,
that was out of mom's fears too. Fear
it
of
was.
losing
It
her
absolutely was. It
Fear of losing her
absolutely
daughter.
was. Yes, that's right. That's right. Her mom was, and even social things like being afraid of how to interact with the other wives of the
Mhm.
men who were going out to fish.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was all about fear. But Ruby's response to that was she's singing is life. I love to sing. Right. It is what life's about for me, which was powerful. And so, yes, absolutely, fear is at the heart of all of this. The dad too. Whenever the parents were talking about whether or not Ruby was going to be able to go away, he said, the mom said, "It's my baby. She's my baby," and the dad said, "She's never been a baby."
Right.
And that's tied into her identity with the family.
It
That
is.
she never really had the opportunity to be a child. She
Right.
never really had the opportunity to not be serving that role for the family.
Yeah.
And even even the one time she does something that's like a teenage appropriate thing to do, where she goes and she has that runaway with her boyfriend, and the family ends up losing
The
the fishing
business
license
is
because she's not there.
upended. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think that's a great segue into another thing about this movie that I did not like.
Yeah. Tell me.
This felt like a very anti-regulation, pro-capitalist, unregulated capitalistic kind of, like, at the very least, it felt libertarian. I might say that it was more like unregulated capitalistic kind of rhetoric that was going on as a part of the story of what they were.
That's interesting.
They were like against anything that didn't give them unregulated.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection. I was too focused on the I was too focused on what was going to happen to Ruby going to school. But that's a really interesting point, because as they're trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet as a family, it is very much portrayed as an impediment to them being able to make ends meet and having that government regulation, even though they kind of showed, as they didn't have anyone on the boat who could hear, that it was an impediment for them not to have that it was dangerous.
But I mean, I think there was a lot of opportunities for talking about like a well-regulated and compassionate regulations as well, because the $800 a day that they were charging them, well, they were barely making $800 a day. So that was a big issue. Like, that's not okay. That's not okay. But at the same time, that exact government is part of what has provided regulations that help folks who are hearing impaired, that help people who have other, I hate using disabilities, different abilities, which seems way too like woke language. But the very government that helps their family in other ways, they ended up fighting against. And I think there was an opportunity to have more discussion. And I think that's one of the faults of this movie, is that it was all happy sunshine. Ultimately, we only talked about problem. You need X. Here's X. Problem. You need, and you didn't get into the grittiness of how do we struggle with this government that's coming in, and we get that they help us in some ways, but this is going to hurt. Is there, it was always just negative about any kind of government being there and regulations that might make things safer and better ultimately.
That's true. That's a good point. That it is primarily portrayed negatively, and we don't talk about all of the services that the government provides. Whereas at the same time, that people who have physical and mental disabilities, who are physically differently abled or mentally differently abled, still tend to be one of the most overlooked groups in our society, and even at church, or maybe especially at church, that even as places that are supposed to be thinking compassionately about folks who are living on the margins, that I think that even when we're giving the list, of ways that we're trying to make the world better, we're trying to be anti-racist, we're trying to be open to LGBTQ plus folks and all of this, that one of the groups that is often left aside are like those who are physically differently abled, or those who are mentally differently abled. Right. And they're often, completely overlooked. And so that I do appreciate that the movie helps us to think about that in a way. And it was at least a conviction to me to say, we could do a better job, I think, of being not only welcoming, but to be affirming of folks who have these kinds of abilities. And so I thought that was kind of powerful. They tend to be, one of the most overlooked groups. So absolutely. I also appreciated, Mark, the real power of family that we see in the film, and of community. And that was theological for me. Did that resonate with you at all?
Oh, it absolutely did. And I really do think that is the main power of this movie, was that core family, the Rossi family. They were so tightly knit, and it wasn't just because it'd be easy to be dismissive of it and say, well, of course they were tightly knit. They were the only deaf family in the community, and they needed the daughter to be able to do anything. That would be the very easy way to dismiss it. But when you look at how they interacted, when you looked at how real and honest and accepting they were of each other, like even in the moments where Ruby was getting embarrassed, Dad would turn it around with this raunchy joke, and she couldn't stay mad because they had this really authentic, real, it was. I think it's why a big part of why it worked was that we all want to be that in that family. We want to be in the family that's just this ridiculously honest, but also ridiculously fiercely protective of each other. I felt like that's why you got a movie that should not have worked to be an amazing movie.
I mean, we even hear it articulated in the film, right? Because the guy who becomes her boyfriend, the Ruby's boyfriend, he talks about seeing her when she was a child, interpreting for the family.
At like 3 years old or something. It was like a crazy young age.
Yeah, very young. And she's like, well, we were hard to miss. She's articulating that she knows they stand out, and she's embarrassed about that. And he said, you were ordering beers for your dad, and I thought you were the coolest person I'd ever seen. and so it also complicates the notion of what family is. Right, because from her perspective, he had a perfect family, and it wasn't. As he
even told her, "You have a perfect family."
And for him, from his perspective, she had the perfect family, and so I thought it was powerful in that way too. That that sometimes the way that we think things ought to work aren't the way things work, and that there's power in thinking about what it is that we have.
Yeah.
So with that, Mark, there's a lot going on in this movie. I appreciate it. Recognize that while it's formulaic, that it brings some attention to some important issues.
Absolutely.
Let's come back after the drop, and if you all have questions, go ahead and put those in the comment section. We're gonna look at some of those questions right when we get back from the drop. Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show.
You got it. You got it. We are entering into our question and answer segment, and this is the place where we answer your questions. And if you don't ask questions, we're going to answer our own questions. But this time around, we're going to do both. We might run a little bit long on the show today, but I think it's worth it. We've got questions out there that I'd like us to address, Caleb, but I'd also like to give us the opportunity, just because this is such an interesting movie. I think that there's things that we can address. So I'm going to ask you the first question from one of our readers, one of our viewers, one of our listeners, and then I'll give you the opportunity to do the same for me. Ready for that?
All right, good. Sounds good.
Okay, I think this is a great question, actually, and it kind of it was in the back of my mind the whole time. Maureen Hamilton, we mentioned earlier, asked the question, why do you think the boyfriend choked on the audition?
Yeah, great question. And
it is a fantastic question. It was in the back of my head the whole time.
Well, it's good to hear from you, Maureen. So Maureen's at a church that I served in seminary, and so it's fun to see your name pop up here, Maureen. I think Ruby gave him a lot of courage, and there was something about singing to her in the midst of that helped him to kind of come out of his shell. And I think Ruby was singing for a different reason. She was singing because she loved to sing. And so when I first saw her sign up for choir, I thought she's signing up for the choir because he's in the choir. And
but she was. But she was. I mean, I remember that scene going, this is like a really badly written sitcom. Come on. Like, that's why she's signing up.
But then it
changes.
I think they show it like that, but I think she really was wanting to go because she wanted to sing.
That makes you feel better. You can do that.
I think she was. I think she was being true to herself. And I think you're right. I think he was being there in part because he wanted to do something to rebel against his parents. I don't think she was trying to rebel against her parents.
Being there was for his parents, and I think that's why he choked. He wasn't doing it for himself.
Yeah.
I mean, he said earlier that all of
this. The dad wanted him to play the cello, not the guitar.
Right. Well, and also he said the whole music thing in general was for his parents because that's what they wanted.
Fair enough.
And I feel like he wasn't there. He was there for his parents. And it was actually, that's why I think this is a beautiful question. He was there for his parents, and it would have been very easy for him to do everything right. And she had done everything in her life for her parents and was doing something for herself. And again, I think this is that whole coming of age breakthrough. Yeah. What am I going to be when I'm not with my family? She was doing it for herself for the first time in her life in some ways, at least in something major. And he was always doing everything for his parents. And I think that's why he choked. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And, Maureen articulates this as well. She says, did he really want to go, or was he just doing what he was expected to do? Yeah. And I think that's a good point. And I think she had to give up a lot. There was a lot of personal cost to go and do this. Yeah. And she had to figure it out. Okay, so
shoot. What's the question towards me?
Well, let me come back
from one of our
readers, from one of the folks who are watching. Yeah. So, Ellen Green has said, "Is there a way that we can help at church? Can you think of ways that churches can be more more welcoming and affirming to folks, maybe specifically with hearing disabilities?
Yeah, I mean, if a person with a hearing disability showed up to my church today, it would be a problem.
Yeah.
It just shows that we don't pay enough attention.
Yeah.
And that does call attention to what do small churches do. I'm at a very small church,
Right.
without any kind of real deep resources. We can't have someone standing by to be a ASL interpreter.
Yeah.
And so that's a very difficult question, particularly when it comes to those who have hearing loss or deaf. But I think it's something we should be considering more. We should be able to be ready to have, there are real-time CC machines now where you can have something loosely put on a screen what you're saying immediately. And that is, at this point, the investment to do something like that is so low. It doesn't cost much at all, particularly since most of us have screens sitting around that aren't being used. It wouldn't be that hard to do something like that. But I think, though, for all communities who are challenged in terms of abilities or disabilities, we can all do a better job. We need to almost like bring in a group of folks. Honestly, I think every church should do this. Start at your front door and pick a disability and walk through your church and consider, how would it be if this was the issue? What can we be doing? And you might not be able to fix it all at once. We've let this go on for far too long in all of our churches. We're not going to be able to fix it I mean, some churches are big enough that they have the money, and if they were willing to do it, they could fix it. But recognize that it can be a slow process, but it's an important process that we all need to be doing. Walk through your church, figure out what could be changed, and start working on teams that can develop new ways of making things more accessible, physically, mentally, audibly, in all of those ways. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, church buildings are also a challenge. I think you're right in terms of hearing. You know, that even if you're talking about like live streaming on Facebook, that a lot of the captions are generated automatically, and that's one way that can be more accessible. Our buildings, I think, are something that can be a blessing or an impediment to when we're talking about people who are, who are physically differently abled. And I think thinking about how our buildings can be more accessible, even if they're older buildings that don't have ramps and things, I think is important too. So Mark, I've got another question for you.
Okay.
I want to ask. I'm gonna break the rhythm. I'm gonna ask you 2 questions in a row.
Okay? Well, okay. Go for it.
So I want to talk about this since it happened at the Oscars last night. So
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. So we're gonna.
I should pour another.
I'm gonna do my best to tie it to the movie CODA, because I don't want to take away from the movie CODA. But I
feel like I should queue up another drink real fast.
Yeah, that's right. Let me talk long enough for you to pour another grumpy old man there.
Go ahead. I'll be listening as I set this back up.
Okay. Okay, so we saw the slap heard round the world last night.
Indeed.
Will Smith slapped Chris Rock after Chris Rock made a joke at the expense of
I think we should put joke in quote marks.
Yes, quote unquote joke.
He attempted to make a joke.
He attempted to make a joke about her hair, and said
which is a result of a disease.
Which is the result of a disease, right? And he said, I look forward to seeing you in G.I. Jane 2. And Will Smith proceeded to walk up on stage and slap Chris Rock, and they had a verbal exchange. What do you think was going on with that, Mark?
Yeah.
And do you think that relates to anything that we see in the movie? And
I want to start with it relating to CODA. So for whatever reason, and I know I'm going to get lots of hate mail because I've posted a few times about this and gotten some negative feedback.
That's why I asked you, Mark, instead of
you're a very wise man. I've always known you're a very wise man. Listen, here's the thing.
Yeah.
After that happened, one, the Academy of Arts and Sciences, whatever, I'm blanking on their names now, allowed him to stay in the building where he just attacked somebody.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not saying, I mean, and this is the weird part as I'm saying all this. I'm a Will Smith fan. I am not a Chris Rock fan. I don't like the way he acts.
Same.
I don't like the way he acts. I don't really care for his humor. It's okay. I don't love it.
Yeah.
I think Will Smith would probably be a better stand-up comedian, frankly. I shouldn't have said that. Did I say that? I should not have said that. I can't believe they allowed him to stay stage front and center.
Yeah.
And I can't believe they then gave him an award and allowed him to give a speech. That said, his speech.
Yeah. I'm interested in your thoughts on the speech.
So there's two parts of it that I'd like to focus on in terms of how this relates to CODA. In that, well, one, it relates to CODA, and other in terms of what happened. He said that basically, in very loose interpretation, I'm protecting my family. My family has some disability stuff going on here, and someone was being mean and cruel and saying stuff that they had no business saying, and I was protecting them. Well, it does relate to CODA in that we have a family that has what can be seen as a disability. Again, I hate that word, and different ability is not anything I really prefer either. But we see in the movie a very different way of handling when people are being mean and cruel towards that. In the movie, we have a family that bonds together and just keeps improving themselves and even ignoring the folks, which part of my issue with this simplistic perspective of the movie. But still, that they choose to do nonviolent ways of dealing with that. And what we saw with Will Smith was a very aggressive, violent, almost, I call it toxic masculinity approach to it. And it was more about him defending his own masculinity than it was anything else in my book. A good friend of mine makes a great point that Black women in America need to be defended, and I don't disagree with that. That's a really cogent point. I'm not sure that was the best or most appropriate or most effective way of doing it. I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah. I also know that black hair, and particularly black women's hair, is can be very empowering and a very sensitive kind of subject. And
Chris Rock had to know that.
And yes, I think he's been involved in projects on black hair, I think. So the fact that he made that joke was extremely inappropriate. They agreed, extremely, but not as inappropriate, I don't think, as Will Smith walking up on stage and smacking Chris Rock. If he had drawn attention to it, I mean, granted, he didn't know if he was going to win, but I mean, he's got a public platform. Right. He could have drawn attention to it at any time to talk about how inappropriate it was. It would have brought attention to his wife and disease. The other problem I kind of had as I was watching is he kind of started laughing. And I mean, maybe we've all been there with partners, but he kind of started laughing. Then he looked over at Jada and saw she was not laughing. Yeah, and he's like,
he was just not laughing. She looked at him like,
do something. Yeah, do something. And so,
she was right. He should not have been laughing at that.
He should not have been. But then it felt like it was an overcompensation for the laughing. I didn't think that was part of what was going on. Yeah, and he walks right on up there.
Here's the bottom line. The bottom line for me is we can, and there's amazing arguments on both sides and people with great perspectives. I don't know that there's a complete right and wrong. Bottom line is, while they both should be illegal acts, only one of them is currently an illegal act. Will Smith walking up and hitting him.
Yeah, he battered him. Yeah,
that is illegal. That is a crime.
It is. Yeah.
I cannot believe that the Academy Awards allowed that to just kind of pass by. And not only that, he was surrounded by people throughout the rest of the evening that were kind of hugging him and supporting him and showing him up. And honestly, our last show was on Summer of Love, and I'm just going to admit part of it just destroyed me because this was Questlove's moment. A moment he deserved deeply. Another great directorial. This wasn't CODA was not the director's directorial, first directorial. Yeah. But was an amazing one. I think that she probably should have won for it. Questlove, I was 100% sure he needed to win for this. This was his moment. And it's just a shame that it got interrupted by something that was based in toxic masculinity rather than in something that supports the whole community.
Yeah. And we didn't touch much on Will Smith's speech, but as he's talking about a vessel of love,
that was the second part that I didn't get to. That was the second part. When
after he's just slapped somebody across the face.
How do you take that seriously?
Yeah. This didn't.
So listen. We could go on and on about toxic masculinity and all this, but here's the opportunity. Here's the real opportunity.
Okay.
I don't think you have seen The Power of Dog. I know I haven't seen The Power of Dog.
I haven't. Yep.
But I've read enough to know that there are some, at least, opportunities to talk about toxic masculinity in it.
Okay.
And so we mentioned at the top of the show that we're thinking about doing The Power of Dog. I think what happened at the Oscars is all the reason more why we should add one more week to what we're doing in terms of Oscar programs. And so we'll do The Power of Dog. So everybody think about that. Watch it yourself. See what questions you might have so you can tune in live, or even beforehand. If you can't make it live, send messages to me or Caleb privately or on the Moonshine Jesus webpage. Please do that. We'd love to hear from you. Hey, Caleb, there was a blast having a discussion on this, and thank you. Thank you for honoring me by dressing up, because few people realize that in my presence they really should be like a little spiffier.
I realized it. I'm like, I'm going to be with Mark Cameron today.
Yeah,
I better put on a tuck.
Me, the guy who wears the same. Like I got 12 of the same outfits that I wear all the time. But I can't critique anybody on their attire. You look fantastic, man. I really have enjoyed this conversation so much.
Great talk to you.
Cheers to you, and I look forward to next week. Thanks for everybody. Glad y'all showed up. Can't wait to see you all next week on the Moonshine Jesus Show. I love that we can't ever do that together.
We keep trying to get it together.
I think it needs to be our thing. All right, we're out. Good to see you all.
Bye.
Moonshine Jesus.